Hi, thanks for joining a new video. Today I'm unboxing the Galaxy S25 FE. Let's begin. This device belongs to Samsung's premium mid-range category, or it could also be considered a sort of high-end entry. The truth is that it's quite interesting because it even has the capability to compete against the Galaxy S25 itself in its very basic setup, yet at the same time, it also resembles the Galaxy S25 quite a lot. Plus, it's pricier due to size. Honestly, if considering a Galaxy S25 or Plus, I'd suggest this cheaper option. Samsung typically drops prices as launches progress, so by now, the Galaxy S25 might already be cheaper. Moreover, as time goes by, this option will continue to decrease in price. Therefore, I believe it will be quite important to consider the price of this model whenever you decide to purchase it. So let's take it out of its box. But first, I tell you that in Mexico has been launched at 15,499 pesos for the version of 128 GB. That is something that I did not like very much. I think that today we have to demand that the basic version is 256 GB. But anyway, I think Samsung gets to think a lot about Apple as its main competitor and not too much in the rest of Android manufacturers. Why? Because when you compare it with what Apple is proposing, for instance, it would be like the iPhone 16, which has a price difference of just 1,000 pesos. So it's really a small difference. However, Samsung provides you with more cameras, a better experience, and overall a device that is much more complete. Therefore, I emphasize that Samsung seems to compare more closely with Apple than with other Android competitors. But let's proceed to take the device out of the box and see what features are included here. Right away, we discover the cell phone in this really appealing navy blue color. Samsung is doing an excellent job with their color choices, at least in my opinion, because, as you know, preferences can differ. However, I truly liked this color. I believe it will be one of the standout features and might even be a reason for some people to decide to purchase this model. We are aware that the box will arrive quite terse, so let's see what we can discover inside. It's essentially an advertisement for Samsung Care Plus. It's a type of insurance that you have the option to purchase. Always make sure to read the fine print, as it might be beneficial. On the opposite side of the box, we discovered a bit more content, although honestly we didn't anticipate it being a significant amount. Let's take a look and open up this small box. As we open it, we remove this envelope-like container. Inside, we find the tool specifically designed for removing the SIM card tray, which is located over here. It includes the usual quick info paper and the USB-C to USB-C cable, which is quite short. That's all. As you might know, it doesn't include a charger, so you'll need to purchase that separately. Like Apple, Samsung provides very few items in the box. However, sometimes if you buy from the official store, they might offer a charger or headphones as a bonus. Then always consider purchasing it from the official store, or at the very least, make sure to check their promotions. In the description, I've provided you with the link to the official store, just in case you weren't aware of it. That's essentially all of the contents you'll find in the box. So as is customary in unboxings for devices like this, we could easily conclude it here. However, let's also take a moment to compare it a bit with the previous generation, because right here we have it, the Galaxy S25 FE. So let's take a moment to discuss the evolution that has occurred. However, before we dive into that topic, allow me to carefully remove the sticker, and then we will proceed to remove the box from this area as well. I already have the device set up here so that we can get familiar with the specifications gradually. We found that it has a thickness of 7.4 millimeters and a weight of 190 grams. In this regard, it shows a significant evolution compared to the previous generation. Samsung is really focused on making their devices both lighter and thinner. And believe me, you can definitely feel it in your hand. In fact, even at first glance, you will notice the slimmer design that we see in this new generation. Moreover, it feels significantly lighter, making it more comfortable to hold in your hand. It features aluminum frames, which Samsung refers to as armor aluminum. The front is protected with Gorilla Glass Victus Plus, and it offers IP, water resistance. The previous generation also utilized aluminum. On the frames, however, it wasn't the armor aluminum, which is what Samsung typically uses on their high-end models. So in some way, it seems it will become more resistant or perhaps more rigid. That would be another of those subtle changes noticed from one generation to the next. However, something important I want you to notice is that it now includes a matte finish, which I personally find very appealing. It's worth mentioning that. The previous generation featured a glass effect, which might have been preferred by some people. Yet I personally favor this matte design because it doesn't produce those reflective results. Therefore, using it without a case looks really nice and attractive. Very nice. There's also a clear difference in the camera design, appearing slightly larger with a more subtle ring and that floating effect we see in the Galaxy S25 series, that wasn't there before. I believe there are subtle differences, but ultimately you can notice them. The screen measures 6.7 inches and features a dynamic AMOLED 2X with full HD resolution. In this instance, it has a refresh rate of 120 Hz. Specifically, the numerical resolution is 2340 by 1080 pixels. It's undoubtedly a great screen, and while it maintains almost the same screen as the previous generation, you should be aware that there is a noticeable difference in how it feels. Observe the size of the bezels on the previous generation, which is the one I have here on the right. They were extremely sharp before, but now they are much thinner. This change gives the impression of a device that feels significantly closer to the high-end models. Although at the bottom there remains a slightly thicker bezel compared to the rest. However, it's important to note a significant difference from one generation to the next. Besides, the same device now feels much more refined in hand. I find the Galaxy S25 to feel quite rough. We also have stereo sound here, with one speaker located at the bottom and another in the earpiece area for calls. If we simply compare the specifications, we can say that both devices offer stereo sound. However, trust me when I say that the sound quality of this new generation again brings us significantly closer to the high-end experience. Surely if you watched my review of the Galaxy S24 FE, you would have noticed that the sound quality was not one of its standout features. The sound initially lacked a strong presence of bass frequencies, with a focus on the mid-range frequencies. It was a straightforward sound. However, in this new generation, you can perceive a much richer and fuller sound. Even the secondary speaker has a notable presence of bass frequencies, which significantly enhances the overall audio experience of the device. Additionally, I noticed, or at least it seems to me, that there is a slightly more advanced anti-reflective finish. It is certainly not what you would call sophisticated, since both create a noticeable reflection. However, you can still observe a variation in the hue of the reflection, which will likely attempt to mask it slightly better. I must emphasize it's nowhere near what the Galaxy S25 Ultra provides, but I mention it simply to highlight a small distinction between the two models. The front-facing camera features 12 megapixels with an f-stop aperture and a fixed focus. Watch as always the comparison of the preview and then the photo results. I think Samsung urgently needs to improve its preview, but well, after processing the image, I think it does a good job. You see a nice detail. You see also a nice effect through its own screen because it has HDR. Then the textures of the clouds, for example, are going to be marked much more because there are areas that shine with greater intensity, and it looks quite impressive through the screen. Additionally, the front camera is one of the features that has significantly evolved, as it used to be just 10 megapixels before. It's not just about the megapixel count, but a total change in the sensor. Comparing photos in this backlit indoor setting, they appear similar, though the S25 FE excels in backlight. So, I believe this sensor will perform better in such conditions. Also take note of the texture of the shirt as it appears more prominently marked on the yes. Here too, there's a small evolution. For the back, we have a 50 megapixel main camera, aperture f1.8, with optical stabilization, then a 12 megapixel ultra wide angle camera, aperture f2.2, fixed focus. Lastly, the telephoto camera has 3x optical zoom, 8 megapixels, aperture f2.4. With optical stabilization, it has the same camera system as last generation. Here, there is definitely no evolution between hardware terms. However, Samsung points out that they have optimized their algorithm, which is called Pro Engine, to improve the details and overall processing of the photos. Let's take a look at some examples. Observe. Here is the ultra-wide camera. It seems to me that the overall quality is good, although it is not yet perceived at the level of a high-end device, but I think it can compete. The main camera has seen significant improvements. I believe it gathers light more effectively, making everything appear quite good. It provides a 2x cropping feature, allowing you to maintain optical quality, and it seems to do this successfully. Next, we move on to the 3x camera, which in fact appears somewhat outdated. I believe Samsung should focus on optimizing it because it's noticeable that the sensor lacks advanced capabilities. The photos taken with it have noise, even on a day that was fairly bright. And I took the picture using 10 times digital zoom. I think it complies well with expectations, but honestly, it is not the most spectacular thing I've ever seen. After that, I tried 20 times zoom, and in this particular case, the device can reach a maximum of 30 times. Digital zoom. It's important to note that unlike other manufacturers, Samsung does not attempt to fabricate details using artificial intelligence or anything similar, so it maintains an approach that is more like a natural photo rather than an artificial one. This approach is quite distinct and noteworthy. It will depend on you as a user what you prefer, but I think they can perfectly put a higher resolution sensor for the telephoto camera to have a better quality of digital zoom without artificial intelligence. But Samsung has not yet improved this aspect, although, as I said, if you compare it, for example, with the iPhone 16e. In this case, you have a much more versatile system because it includes both an ultra-wide camera and a telephoto camera, whereas on the iPhone you would only find the main camera and that's all there is. It seems to me that this is why Samsung has not yet improved this system too much, although other Android manufacturers have already matched this system or even surpassed it in even cheaper devices. But where Samsung gets to stand out a lot is in video recording, as it notes that the front camera can record in 4K up to 30 frames per second, definitely the experience of a flagship. On the back, you have the capability to record in 4K at 60 frames per second. However, this is only available for the main camera. As you can observe, the ultra-wide camera and the telephoto camera are not enabled for this setting. In fact, you can achieve up to 4K resolution once again only with the main camera, but it's important to note that the ultra-wide and telephoto cameras are indeed compatible with recording in 4K at 30 frames per second. Here, you are watching a brief recording captured using this camera, showcasing its capabilities. Just to give you a general idea, more or less, of how it actually records, the ultra-wide camera, I think it doesn't have as accurate colors. They look a little cooler than they should, but the other cameras seem to me to behave well. It reaches a maximum of 12x digital zoom. Here again, it is noticeable that the telephoto camera does not have a high-resolution sensor. But overall, I insist that it can be competitive with system, especially also considering that it is basically the same system that is used in more expensive devices such as Galaxy S25 and Galaxy S25 Plus. In terms of the system, we have Android 16 paired with One UI 8. This is truly an excellent aspect, especially considering that many manufacturers are still launching their devices with Android 15. Additionally, it comes with the promise of 7 system updates, ensuring it remains up to date for quite some time. This device is designed for longevity, particularly when you consider its water resistance, durable metal frame, and the inclusion of Gorilla Glass Victus Plus for added protection. I truly believe that, yes, this is a device that, with the right care and attention, can last you for quite a number of years. And of course, Samsung provides the complete Galaxy suite with this device. This includes the call assistant, typing, interpreter, note assistant, transcription, and navigation, as well as photo editing. It even comes with the audio eraser feature, which was added in an update to the Galaxy S25 FE, a feature it didn't originally include. Samsung updates past generations, showing proper care to its users. So yes, we'll find all the artificial intelligence options over here. We'll also find an optical fingerprint reader integrated under the display. Here, it still does not give you the feeling of a flagship because Samsung in the flagships places an ultrasonic fingerprint reader, i.e. it does not need to emit this intense light for recognition, and it is also faster and could even recognize when your finger is a little wet. The optical fingerprint reader that brings this device is a little simpler. The battery will be 4900 mAh. With support for 45 watts charging, however, the charger is sold separately. This is another evolution from the previous generation, which had a somewhat smaller battery. Yet, the battery is not the main feature of this cell phone, especially when considering that other manufacturers offer much larger batteries. Nonetheless, it should be mentioned that Samsung is capable of achieving better optimizations. It all depends on the screen's power consumption, which is crucial. Samsung uses highly efficient screens in the Galaxy S25. The Galaxy S is the pinnacle of high-end models. We'll need to test this phone to see if it also features a screen so efficient that it enhances battery performance beyond expectations, but we'll cover that in our video review. For now, it's clear it advances us towards a premium wireless charging experience as it supports both wireless and reverse wireless charging. I recommend the 256 GB version. It's easier to fill up your headphones or another device with this phone, and the experience is advanced. And let's finish talking about performance. It integrates 8 GB of RAM and 128 GB of storage in the basic configuration. This is definitely one of its weakest points because there are even cheaper devices that come with 512 GB. I would not ask 512, but at least 256, and we do not see it here. I think it will be more recommended that you buy the 256 GB version because it will fill up more easily. Although it will clearly be a pricier option, I would suggest that you hold off for a bit longer. It's likely that the price will decrease, making it more advisable to purchase at that time. Finally, the processor is the Exynos 2400. Yes, I know I mentioned Exynos and it worries some. This time it's paired with a vapor chamber that's 10% larger than the previous version. In fact, the last generation had a reduced Exynos. I believe performance was one of the weakest aspects of this device, especially for gaming, as it came with the Exynos 2400. Now, this version, which does not include trimming, is fortunately accompanied by the new Steam camera. I believe it indeed achieves a notable performance improvement. A single core reached 2,181 points last generation, and I think the score remains similar. But the difference is in multi-core, where this version hit 7,105 points, while the last was at 6,775. The improvement is clear in Antutu, with this device reaching 1,095,969,963 points, while the last was at 1,755,600 points. Obviously, these scores are meant for reference purposes and can vary depending on the specific environmental conditions. However, in general, you will likely notice better performance on this device when compared to the Galaxy S25 FE. Although the improvement is not dramatic, as I always mention, I believe that for the vast majority of users, it will provide good performance. For gamers, we'll have to wait and see the results from the tests that we will conduct in the review to get a clearer picture. For the moment, we have reached the end of this video. I hope you liked it. If so, you can tell us, and we'll see you next time.